One of the biggest requests I have received is concerning the chord numbering system. These days, if you interact with session musicians, you hear them talk about 145, 641. So people have been asking me, where do they get those numbers from? So this is what I want to explain today. If you watch my videos, you always hear me encourage musicians to know their major scale. So those numbers, they emanate from the major scale. For example, in the key of C, the major scale is, that's the major scale. And every chord has got its own major scale. It is from that scale that you get those numbers. So what you simply do is, for example, in the key of C, the scale is C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So what you do is you put numbers on those scales. So C is 1, D is 2, E is 3, F is 4, G is 5, A is 6, B is 7, and the other C is the 8th one. So that's where you get your numbers from. So if somebody says, I want 1, 4, 1, 5 in the key of C, what it means is C, F, C, and G. Which means if you are playing chords, it will sound like C, F, C, and G. Then if somebody says, I want 6 and 5 only, it means in the key of C, 6 is A, which is A minor, and 5 is G. So what it simply means is he wants 6, 6, and 5. Then another issue that I want to address is the number of people who think that African music does not have chord progressions because we simply play melodies. That's not true. For every melody that you hear someone sing or someone play, there's a chord progression underneath. And what happens with African music is we do have chord progressions, but what we do is we create melodies around that chord progression. Some people are aware of it, some are not, but the concept is the same. When you create a melody, you do have a chord progression underneath. And it's very important for you to understand chord progressions because if you don't understand chord progressions, usually there's a tendency to have your whole catalog of songs or a whole album with the same chord progression. And the danger is that if you understand the language and the culture, you might not notice that you are hearing the same chord progression. But for someone who doesn't understand the language or the culture, it's like they're hearing one song. So, coming back to chord progressions, there's one chord progression that's very common in Zimbabwean Mbira music. It's 6 and 5. So it goes like, I'm going to add some melodies now. So which means Thomas Mapfumo's Moyo Wangu's chord progression is 6 and 5. You have always heard me say that Sungura music usually uses 1, 4, 1, 5 chord progressions. What it means is in the key of C, 1 is C, F is 4, then you go back to 1, which is C, and G, which is 5. So that's 1, 4, 1, 5. I'm going to add some melodies now. So that's where you get those numbers from. And these days in Zimbabwe, here in Zimbabwe, if you want to be a session musician who is hired by different artists, you really need to know your basic music theory. When you talk of music theory, I don't mean that you have to go to a college of music or you have to go to a music institution. I got my first theory lessons from Ambuji and Isaac Chirwa. That was not in a school, that was not in a college. And some of it you can just ask from fellow musicians. See, you know, how do I get the major scale? And then off you go, and then you can make some money. And I know some people always say, Sungura musicians can just play even if they don't know their chords and their basic music theory. But look at some of the most prominent Sungura musicians. Did you ever hear them play for any other artists that are not Sungura? The reason is because Sungura music usually uses one chord sequence, that 1-4-1-5, and because of that you can get away without even knowing your chords. You can make a career without knowing your chords. But for you to go and play for other genres of music, like for example the way gospel music is now being played in Zimbabwe these days, it involves a lot of chords, and you really have to know your chords. So to broaden your horizon as a session musician, for you to be able to play in Sungura bands, in rock bands, in jazz bands, in gospel bands, you really need to know your chords. You really need to know your basic music theory. Unless you just want to play in a Sungura band and not play with any other artist, then it's okay. You can just play without knowing your chords. But if you want to really broaden your horizon, you really need to learn your chords. Don't listen to what people who are not musicians say. Some of the people they mention are band leaders. So I thought Bob was in the band. But can a session musician you play in another band? If you are a musician and you want to broaden your horizons, know your chords.
Manolio Studio. The harmony of quality and professionalism.